Before we get into the discussion of G-code, it's important to note that many companies build these type of post-processor and slicer machines which create the G. And although it is similar, it can be different. So never assume if you have a different slicer program that it's the same as this one. In this lesson, we'll look at this program I have open, and I also have the Marlin G-code webpage open. First thing we should note is that G-code are preparatory codes, and they prepare the machine to do something, where M codes are miscellaneous codes, and they'll do things like turn something on and off. As we read the G-code, at the beginning of any well-written program are comments, and that's for us humans to help understand what's happening. We know it's a comment because it has the semicolon and then the comment. So if we go through this, we can see that it's Marlin G-code. We can see how much material is used, what the layer height is, the minimum and maximum X, Y, and Z positions. And the other thing we should note right away, all these dimensions are metric, so these are all in millimeters. So let's have a look at some of the code. The first code we see is an M140 S50. So how do I know what they are? Well, S, if this were a typical CNC machine, would typically mean to turn the spindle on at 50 revolutions per minute. However, a 3D printer doesn't have a spindle. So first, let's look up M140. So I'm going to go over here to the GM code list, scroll down till I find M140. And here's M140. It sets the bed temperature, and this means 50 degrees. The next thing we see is an M105. So again, I'm going to scroll back up, and M05 tells it to report the temperatures to the machine. And then we have an M190, an S50, and an M104, an S200. So the M190 tells the machine wait until the bed temperature is 50 degrees before any movement's allowed. Then the M104, S200. So M104, set the hot end temperature to 200 degrees. This is the extruder. Then we have an M105, again, report the temperatures. And then the M109 S200, which is going to tell it to wait until it is 200 degrees before it moves. Next, we see an M82. So if I scroll up, we see M82 is E absolute, where E is the extruder. In another video, we'll go through what's the difference between relative, absolute, and increment. As we continue on, we see this line starts with an M201, X500, which tells the machine to move to its 500 millimeter position in the X, 500 millimeter in the Y, and 100 millimeter in the Z. The M201, if we scroll down, we can find it over here, tells it to set the maximum acceleration, which is the E. So it's saying don't move faster than 5,000 millimeters per minute. Then as we go to the next line, it's going to move down to Z10 from 100. It's going to maintain its X and Y position, and it's going to set the machine maximum feed rate to 50 millimeters per minute. So the initial G-code is all to make sure the bed and the print head are at the proper temperature, and then it gets ready to prepare to print. Down here in G28, it homes the machine. And then G92 tells it where to work from relative to where you placed your part within the software. Then we can see it starts to move around and feed the material through. So here, the G1 means move at a specified feed rate to Z2 millimeters. An important thing to note here is there's no decimal point on this F. F is a feed rate. So without a decimal point in metric, we move the decimal that's over here at the end of the 0 3 places over, and that means it's going to feed at 3 millimeters per minute. If this were inch, we would move the decimal place 4 units over. And we can continue to look up the G codes and see what each one means, but this is just an introduction. So I want you to be aware that this is how the machine moves. The various codes tell it what to do. And you could look all this up, or you could manually type the code to print whatever you want, layer by layer.